Apologies for the delay. Welcome. Super exciting to have you here for our panel called Gaming to Save the World, ? The potential of games to lead to a brighter future. Some things out of the way first. Yeah, so my name is Patrick. I am working in the game design department, so basically just over there. You could sort of look out of the window and see my office. And I have with me a really, really awesome panel today with Johan Eriksson, who's also working with me in the department, and Daniel Uneos, who's a master student with us, but also working at Eat, Create, Sleep, a local game design studio here in Visby. So super excited to have you here. Some of the things out of the way first. The emergency exits are here, this black door, and otherwise out there through the hallway. The panel is bilingual in the sense that the presentations will be mostly in English. But if you have questions, om det finns frågor eller oklarheter eller någonting, då kan vi gärna byta till svenska också. And you can also ask questions in Swedish, so that is completely fine. We will record this, so if you don't want to be in the recording, then please sit behind those two cameras over there on the back. But yeah, I think that's all of that. We are planning to go for roughly half an hour, but there is time afterwards for one-on-ones or for coming up, but we are also trying to have some time for questions during the first half an hour. We will go with a brief intro and then sort of 2 rounds to discuss the positive sides of games. Okay, so with that out of the way, the topic of the panel today will be looking at games from a side that is positive, that is interested in the things that are awesome, that are great and cool about it. The conversation in public about games is quite often not even only critical, but also sometimes just quite negative, like in a sense that isn't necessarily based on facts or things that have to do with games specifically, but that are just sometimes ways of talking games down because they are stigmatized as low culture or connecting other issues to them that aren't really what central or relevant to games specifically, but something that is an issue more broadly. So that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a critical lens, but it means that we should also, in addition, take a look at some of the things that are positive, that are interesting about this. And so this is why I wanted to bring some of us together who have chosen to spend our lives studying games, making games, teaching about games, who are enthusiastic about them, to share these perspectives as well a little bit. With that brief intro, Johan, from your perspective, what is the best part of games?
Well, the best part of games is super bad answer, but they're fun. Besides the fact that they're fun, I would say that it's one of the strongest media forms we have, in my mind. And all that comes with that. All the bad, all the good. So, yeah.
Danielle, from your perspective, what's the best?
Oh. I like the possibility to make it interactive and actually play around with simulations and being able to not only show systems that we have in our society, but also like actually interact with them. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so Johan, you have a PowerPoint presentation prepared. That was games as cultural carriers. So what is that about?
Yeah, so generally speaking, I want to talk a bit about, because we often underestimate the cultural values of games and what they're actually able to bring to the table. And this is something I want to frame by allowing us to understand games slightly better and what they're actually made up of and what we're doing when we're gaming, all of those things. So this is my entry point into my talk. Should I start
Go ahead.
with that?
Yeah.
All right. So premise 1 of everything I'm going to say is that I want to throw this dichotomy out the window. It's not entertainment or education. It's both all the time. Okay? There is no clear distinction between games that are teaching you a lot of things and games that are not. It's what we use them for. Okay? Premise 2 for this whole talk is that we do want and need change. So this is one of the premises I'm talking from. Okay? Also want to mention the magic circle, because without understanding the magic circle, we don't know what games are. Basically, whenever we're entering into a game state of mind, we're entering into like an exception state. We're saying, hey, this is just a game, so I'm agreeing to this thing. As for my play session, all rules are true. When I am engaging with a game and actually allowing myself to enjoy it, my critical centers are slightly put on hold. This is important, because I'm allowing myself that experimentation. But I also know it's just a game, so it's outside of reality. There are no harsh consequences of this. All right? So that's the 3 premises that I've built my part of the talk on. Okay? Starting with, what do we actually mean when we say games? And this is taking a very broad definition, all right? It includes tabletop gaming, and it includes child's play, it includes all of these things. It's play in broad. It starts with, we have limitations and systems. We have regulations of how to interact when playing the game, okay? We play the game by doing actions within those systems, and those systems gives us feedback. That's also very fundamental. Without any of those parts, it's not a game. It literally breaks down. I also want to state that they're exploratory artifacts in that we explore those systems. We might not understand all the rules when we start playing a game. We learn the game. That's part of the play experience, okay? Within all of that, we pack cultural meaning. It means stuff. When I play a game and it uses a monetary system very close to our banking system, I learn about that banking system whether I like it or not, okay? Games allow us to immerse ourselves in alternate imagined worlds. We can imagine whatever we want and put it into a game and allow our users, our players, to actually experience that. For a brief pocket of time, they can be in that world, all right? It's a big difference from, for example, reading a fact book or literary fiction, because I'm actually acting within that system. I am putting myself, without actual consequences, on the line to achieve my goals within that system. We explore those new patterns. We often surprise ourselves when we play games. We really act in ways we wouldn't be comfortable acting in other circumstances. So we explore these new ways of interaction. Through that exploration, we actually do create temporary small pockets of culture. And we can see this as different gaming cultures arise around certain games. Certain games foster certain gamer cultures, all right? This comes from the values instilled in the systems of those games. Those sometimes transfer into real life. Those sometimes do not. It just depends on how broad the culture is, how many are playing the game, etc., etc. End line. Games are human interactions without risk. I've said this before, but I want to emphasize this. It allows us to play with notions that we don't want to experiment with in real life yet. Okay? We learn through games by navigating them. We learn new patterns of interaction through repetition. We repeat the acts that were successful and don't repeat the acts that weren't successful. We also get feedback from the system. It tells us when we're doing something right, all right? We've also learned that actions are only as important as their consequences. So if I have an act and it doesn't give me any feedback, I won't repeat it, even though underneath the hood, it might actually change things. If I don't know about it, I'm not going to repeat that thing. Okay? So, bottom line, rules define player agency. When I say player agency, I mean the things we are allowed to do and do within games. Game designers define those rules. All right? It's an invisible boundary setting. When you're playing a game, you don't really think about the designer's intention unless you're really literate in games. You just play the game. In my mind, games are the art of agency. It's where designers and artists and creators explore agency as the thing to make art with. At their best, games can empower us as agents of change by allowing us to explore new venues of interaction and understanding systems from within, not from without, not through facts, but through experience. We play games to practice the skill of learning about our environments. We play games to experience varied levels of control and to better understand agency. Different games give rise to different cultures among players. Games can be as deep or serious as we allow them to be. Okay? So, I'm going to end on this. What can we do, actually? This is hard to talk about in realpolitiska termer. It's hard to talk about this as anything else than philosophy. It's hard to talk about this in any other terms than what can we use this for and kind of lofty thinking. But they are a tool for exploring ideas and systems. And we shouldn't see them as anything else. Whether we're doing it for just fun or for educational purposes, it doesn't really matter. They're still doing the same thing. They are also cultural artifacts as profound as any piece of art. And I think it's really important for us in a political sense to actually see them as that mature. They are. And people are engaging in them broadly. I think we should use games to create and explore societal solutions of tomorrow, basically. I think that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Johan. I think that's a really good also handover to Danielle.
Transition.
In terms of topics, I think you're on with this one.
Yes. Cool.
I don't know.
Perfect. Do we need to switch to the images?
Yeah.
I'll do that.
Okay. Cool.
Here we go.
We're gonna have a little bit more colors. No. So this is Among Ripples. It is the game that we are currently working on the studio Eat Create Sleep. And this game is a management game where you play as the leader of a team of scientists, and you are traveling around in Sweden with the goal to restore lakes from environmental damage. You and your scientist friends, you need to rebuild ecosystems and balance them, and you do that by terraforming the surrounding, introducing new species, and fauna. So here are some more pictures. We're currently in alpha, so a little bit what it looks like. I'm gonna end on that one. So the core message behind this game, or what we wanted to do, was to show a different reality. Like, what could it look like if we tried to save the environment? And we also wanted to show how fragile these systems can be, but also how they work. We've been collaborating with biologists in order to make sure that this game is an accurate representation of reality. But most importantly, we want to show that there are concrete things that we can do if we want to. And we call our theme Hopeful Restoration. So when it comes to the gameplay, this game is very much like any other management game. Think Roller Coaster Tycoon, City Skylines, 2 Point Hospital. But in some ways, it's also very different. So for example, if you look at the most fundamental system for these types of games, it is the economics. So for the player, the goal is to gain as much capital as possible, to maximize profit, to build the biggest park or city or hospital. That is the goal. It's a very capitalistic gameplay in that sense. So when it came for us with Among Ripples, where the theme is about hopeful restoration, it didn't really sit right with us, because in many ways we can blame capitalism for our current climate crisis. So we felt that we had to invent a new economic system. So in the beginning of our production, our gameplay was very much this similar capitalist gameplay, and what we realized was that lakes became a capital generator. So the ecosystem and the economic system were heavily intertwined and dependent on each other. So we decided to make sure that we separate these, to make sure that the incentive for the player to do what they do in the game is not an economic one, but it's about valuing and saving our environment. So we still have economics in this game, but it's grant-based, and we are, during development, making sure that the ecosystem doesn't become a money generator for the player. So for most management games, the goal is to maximize profit. And for Among Ripples Shallow Waters, the goal is to maximize life. And so this is just an example of how we can use game to explore a complex system, to think of other ways to structure our society. And today it can feel quite impossible to change our surroundings. I mean, we have a stupid war, shootings, climate crisis, and it's easy to become pessimistic, passive. And when we feel hopeless, it's very hard to think about alternatives. So hope is really important. I like how Helen Keller said it, that optimism is the faith that leads to achievement. Nothing can be done without hope and confidence. And I believe here that games can be the tool that we can use to play around with what ifs and experiment with different ways of structuring and designing our society and our world. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Danielle. Yeah, a really, really nice connection here, right? We talked about, if I get to paraphrase you, expanding the social imaginary, Johan, right? Like, what are the things that we can see as a future even? And then this concept of hopeful restoration, right? Making something that, giving you a picture of, hey, it could be like this. And it's not that I just watch this, but I get to experience it while doing it. So yes, I think that's a really interesting take here on games. I haven't answered my own question yet, so I would like to do that as well. From my perspective, the best thing about games is that you can make them. The best thing about games is that they're not something that by nature is something that you just consume and it's put in front of you and just do it. But whenever you play games, or whenever you play games also with people that are very enthusiastic, again, sort of my sample being my children here, you play one round of a game and afterwards say, this was fun, but you know it would be even better if it was like this. Right? There's this immediate step from playing the game to making the game, to remaking, to changing it. There's a sense with play and with games that this isn't just set in stone and we just have to accept as it is, and they probably had good ideas doing this. But it's like, maybe we try differently. And that is what I think is the coolest part about games. That's not always possible. A while back, we played the Telltale game, The Walking Dead, and I played that with my kids. It's maybe not exactly PG, 10 or 9, don't tell my wife about it. But it has a girl as a sort of a character that you're playing, so you're playing a child in that world, and it was really nice to be with them and go through that, so we played that, and then we also played Pokemon Go, and at some point one of them was like, it would be really cool to have your Pokemon in The Walking Dead. I was like, it would be, It would be so cool. Like, there's these zombies everywhere, but me and Pikachu, we are gonna get through this. You know, like, that would be awesome. It's not really going to happen because companies own these different things. IP law forbids you to do this, and if you even pitch the idea, then maybe there's a letter from a lawyer in your office, in your mailbox somewhere. So games are participatory. Games are by nature free. That's how they strive, when you can make things. Looking at history, where all of this cool stuff comes from that we're playing, it's always player innovation. Counter-Strike was a mod. The entire MOBA genre was a mod. Like, all of that was modifications by players, for the joy of playing, for the joy of making, of remaking, with rapid iteration cycles somewhere online where all of these things were built. The entire MMO genre, all these virtual worlds, all mods, like all players, for players. So the center of games is participation, co-creation, and making for each other. And oftentimes we talk about that the creative stuff is happening at the fringe, but I think games show that no. The creative, the participatory, that is the core. The industry, the for-profit, the polish, the high-rise, that is the fringe. Like, that is the exception. The normal of play is sharing, making, participating. So for me, that is what is the central part about that. Play, participation, that is active, making it, remaking it, right? That's why we are in an education that teaches game design, that teaches game making. So I'm going to finish and just take this, like, what I think we should be doing about this, right? I think the interesting part is making culture together. I wanted to talk about the positive side of games. Of course, I also want to mention briefly the critical elements that are part of this. The games industry and games in many ways have connections to sexism, racism. Sanctified targets are Muslims that you can shoot because they wear a particular kind of clothing and have dark enough skin, so that's all right, don't worry about it. It's connected to the military entertainment complex. You can literally press a PlayStation button to kill someone with a drone somewhere if you're an American soldier. We have all these elements there. They are not what is core to games. They are issues that are in society that are also in games, but it's not what games are about. When we talk to our students, what they want to do, why they study games, it's because they made important, meaningful connections. They got something from these games that was important to their life, and they want to make that same thing and give it to somebody else. That's why they do it, and that's why we do it, and that's why we love games, and that's why we care about them. So I think that is what is, from my perspective, the best part about games.
Yeah, I want to tag on to that, actually. I didn't mention this in my part at all, but all games are social all the time. This is a really important aspect. I mean, even solo games, single-player games, are social in that you're still interacting with the designer. It's a delayed sociality, if that makes sense. And the co-creation part is super important. I have to stress this. This is, if we're looking at child's play, it's co-created all the time. You're negotiating rules. You're saying, what if? You're saying, it's better if we do this. And this is carried into computer gaming, tabletop role-playing, board gaming, all of these things. So that's a really intrinsic part of gaming as a field.
Thank you, Johan. Danielle, do you want to have the last word? Is there anything that we should do to make games the best they can be?
Yeah, I've been thinking that we need to invest more in games that are trying to be something else than just a colonialist power fantasy. I think that we need to invest more in educations that support different designers' kind of background and educate on how to think holistically and give them the tools to really present their perspective in games. And I think that is how games can be the playful, accessible media to question the status quo that I believe that it really can be.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What questions? Yeah, okay. What questions do you have? Anybody Yes.
I don't know if it works. Hi, Paulina Rajkowska, Sulfdoktoran Förening. I was wondering, because it's sort of, you're talking about the very inspirational parts of games, the modding, the culture, and that's sort of something that I've also grown up with. But right now it feels like we're finding ourselves in a place where the toxic is taking over, in the sense of radical behaviors, games that are promoting a whole set of values. I remember when I was growing up and playing games, the American Army game that was supposed to motivate everybody to join the military. And there are all of those uses that are also in the pipeline. So how do we get from sort of the swamp we have a little bit now to where you are, or all seeing the potential of it? What would be your tips on? I think Daniela started on it with saying that, you know, it is about investment and education. But what else do you think is relevant to change this situation into its full positive potential?
No.
I can say like this. So it's easy to conflate what the systems do and the visual layer of a game. So, for example, if I make a war game, it looks like I'm playing war, right? But if you're looking at the systems beneath that outer layer, it might not be that I'm doing. The act might be something else. I might be managing resources. That's the main takeaway of playing this war game. It might be managing economy. It might be all of these different things. And as a player of that game, I'm not actually really thinking that I'm blowing up people. I might be thinking that I'm trying to balance accounts, and that's fun. But the point I'm trying to make here is that, first thing, we need to properly be literate in what games are to be able to analyze this and what that act is. Secondly, historically speaking, we're actually, I would say, in a better place with like toxic cultures in gaming than we've been in a long time. It started out super toxic, and it's been horrible, honestly. And it's been growing better and better. We're seeing an increase in like inclusive communities building games. We're seeing all of these things. So that's 2. Number 3, we don't want to dilute ourselves and think that everything is good in game land. It very much isn't. One thing is, in the last talk about fake news and media literacy, I stated as a question that we need to go back to motivations and reasons why things look like they do in order to navigate media. We need to understand the philosophy behind something. If we cannot do that, then we won't be able to solve those issues. So I think that's my take on that. We really need to reconnect with why we're making media to start with, and be wary of why other people are making media. For example, if the producer of a game is the American Army, I might be inclined to not view that war simulation as softly as I would if someone else is doing it. So yeah, that's my take, I think.
So many thoughts, and I agree a lot of the points you said. I'm also thinking about, it's so easy to focus on the dark parts of the game's culture, but then we also have a lot of really positive, beautiful communities and also games. I played Spiritfire during the pandemic, and that really touched me. And it's a game that works with death and how do you grieve and how do you move on. So you have this such a spectrum. So yeah, but then I also believe that we should like hold bigger companies accountable for their communities, because in many ways, I mean, they know design, but they still allow communities to be developed where they could use game mechanics in order to foster a more safe and inclusive environment. I mean, they have the tools to do that. So I don't know, keep them accountable for that.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. And I think, like, as you mentioned, right, there's different levels of actions. One of them is best practices in the industry, accountability for the industry, for community management is a huge step, but also other things. I just had a bachelor students writing a paper about modded versions of a like big, large-scale war game where now, as Hitler, you can win. And it was really coming from that community. I was like, wow, I didn't know that existed. Of course it did, right? So yes, it's easy to find these dark things. So accountability for the industry, but also for us, right? Then go out of your way and just try something else than that AAA title that's being released, right? Be aware of who's making games, who are the people behind that, and what are they doing? What is happening there, right? Broaden your tastes a little bit. Try some indie things. Take a look at itch.io to see what happened in the Inclusivity Game Jam. Right? There is a lot of awesome stuff. Not all of it has a marketing budget. So there's something that's individually we can do, and that could be broadened, and it could be like a liberal arts education that also people get at schools. Like, here's stuff that happens, like, look at this art and games and media. So that could be an interesting step. And then we can take a look at top-down actions, maybe as legislations as well. Like, all of this, not mentioning that, yes, obviously education is where we have chosen to already do something in our own. Yep.
So one more thing on this is that I'm going to say something now. All right. The mainstream game industry is kind of anxious, and it's kind of worried to lose revenue. So it regurgitates things that they know has been successes in the past. They do follow-up games on follow-up games on follow-up games on follow-up games, sequels on sequels, just because they don't dare to step out of what gave them that $1 million revenue last time. So if we're looking at it from a societal point of view, maybe start more like bigger game festivals that rise these smaller productions. Maybe look at how to give platform to those who are not maybe super mainstream industry. I think that would change a lot. It also would allow these really mature, like, serious games, as the game version of Dostoevsky, to actually get some space. And this is what I meant also by taking them seriously as cultural carriers. I think we owe it to these creators who are putting their soul into these creations to actually see them for what they are. Profound things, profound works of art. And it's hard to say that without mentioning them, but let's not do that right now. It's actually not about that specific thing right now.
Any other questions? We are... One more. Göran?
Yes, my name is Göran Svensson, and a colleague with Patrick, actually. I had a question to you, Patrick. If we look at the movie industry, we've seen consolidations. There are a lot of hybrid genres, and also buying comics, etc., and bringing in character from different games. So I just thought about your example there. Could you see a development just like in the movies, where all of these characters are mixed up because there is an interest in making more money for that?
I think that it's very much possible that soon Disney near you will bring you everything because they own everything. That is not the future I am looking forward to for other reasons, though, Göran. But yeah, that might happen from that perspective. So yes, this sort of insane cultural sort of accumulation is not something that I would support. My step out of this would be reduced intellectual property protection, so that these texts go into the public sphere, so that my kids can make their game and everybody else as well. But yes, that it might happen that way as well. I hope it doesn't. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming and being here with us today, and thanks for the questions and for staying longer. Thank you so much.
Thank you.